Tim Keller. Tim Keller, maybe that's a name that rings a bell to some people. Tim Keller. He is a Presbyterian minister, but he is more widely known as a Christian apologist. That is, he is a defender of the faith. And he has written many books, and what he does in our age of skepticism is he appeals to people's reason, arguing the validity of the Bible. And one of the arguments that he uses to defend that the Bible is true, the Bible is real and it's inspired and it's actually fact. One of the arguments that he does is he points people to this very story right here. And for brevity's sake, he basically says, if you were going to embellish the facts of the most influential character in all of history, if you were going to prop that person up, you would talk and make his first miracle completely different. It would be completely different than the way John records it. So let's suggest that you are going to start an influential movement, a massive influential movement. You are going to be the leader. You're going to take this up, and you are going to change the world. Right? This is going to be you. This is going to be your calling. This is going to be your movement. Your first press conference, your first public presentation to the world, it's going to have to be clear. It's going to have to be meaningful. Clearly express what you're all about, what your movement is all about. Wouldn't you agree? That if you want to get a following, you want this thing to get some traction behind it, get it rolling, that first public presentation is very important. It's got to be clear. It's got to be meaningful. And maybe even it has to have a certain wow factor to it. Get some pizzazz to draw people's attention, to draw them in. Now, if you could pick any venue for your presentation, you probably wouldn't go up the road to Haver. You wouldn't go over to Hoskins. You wouldn't go down west on 275 to Pilger. Go big or go home, right? Go big. Maybe New York, maybe LA. Or, if you could choose any events, how about the most televised event of the year? The Super Bowl. Last year, it was the most televised event in America throughout all history. Maybe you choose the Super Bowl as your event, get the most attention, or you go even bigger. The Olympics. Get the attention of not just America, the world. Right? Get the whole world. Maybe that opening ceremony at the Olympics where the world is watching, maybe that's where you would choose to do this. To have your first presentation, your first public press conference about your movement. Go big. You see, that's probably how we would think of doing something, at least inventing something. That's how we probably start. And what do you see in John's Gospel? We see Jesus in Cana of Galilee. Not your modern day New York or LA, not Jerusalem or Rome. He is in modern day Hader, modern day Hoskins. He is in this little podunk town that is barely even a blip on the map as an invited guest to a wedding. And what happens? They're running out of wine. They're running out of wine. Now this is bad. Now, keep in mind, weddings back then, they're a lot different than the way we do weddings now. Weddings back then weren't just a day. Their celebration lasted a couple days, maybe even up to an entire week. And not having wine, that was probably about as big of a social miscue as you could have had. Because I don't care whatever era you're living in, back then or now, there's one constant principle that remains the same. Entertain your guests. Make the reception, make the wedding celebration fun and entertaining for people. And not having wine, that was probably as big of a social mistake that you could make. It'd probably be on par, maybe modern days, where you would invite 200 or 300 people to your wedding reception, and they all get there, and then you say, "Ooh, sorry guys, forgot to book a DJ to MC our wedding, so no entertainment." Wouldn't be very good. It'd be a memorable wedding, but for all the wrong reasons. And what do we see Jesus do? The party is being threatened to be cut short by a few days. A big social embarrassment for this disorganized couple. And Jesus comes in, he saves the day by revealing as his very first miracle, changing water into wine. Now think about that for a second. No one's dead. No one's dying. No one's injured. No one has a disease. No one is sick or ill. As his very first miracle, what we have here is Jesus saving a couple from social embarrassment and making a wedding party last a little bit longer. That's what we have. You and I would do things completely differently, wouldn't we? Reynolds Price, he's a Duke University English professor, and he wrote in one of his books, he kind of sums this entire thing up. He says, if you were inventing a biography of Jesus Christ, that is, if you were just making up stories about Jesus to get across his power and his glory, who would invent the inaugural event of Jesus' career, a miraculous solution to a mere social embarrassment? I think he's got a point. He basically says this is almost like proof that the Bible is real. This is almost proof that what is happening is actually real. Because you and I, if we were going to write a fiction novel, we'd embellish that first miracle. We'd prop it up. We'd make it bigger than what it is. We'd make it much more urgent than what it seemed. So it all begs the question then, why this? Why did Jesus choose to reveal his glory as the one and only, for the very first time, in a manner of saving a disorganized couple from their colossal social faux pas? Why this miracle? And to answer that, I want you to look at verse 11 again. Look at John's words in verse 11. And notice that he doesn't describe this as a miracle. John in verse 11 says this is a sign. John uses that all the time in his gospel. He calls this a sign. Because this miracle right here, changing water into wine, was a sign of what Jesus was all about and what he came to do. This celebration, saving miracle is quite appropriate because it is a microcosm, if you will, of what Jesus' entire ministry was all about. And ultimately, what we have Jesus doing here, I think you'd agree, he's putting the joy back into this wedding celebration. And that is exactly what he does for us. That's why he came, to put wedding-type joy into your lives. And I say wedding-type joy for a reason, because there is something about that wedding joy that goes on for the bride and the groom. That joy at a wedding, it is unlike any other joy. If you're married, I want you right now to think back to your wedding day. Make your thoughts drift back there. Even if it was 40, 50 years ago, I know you can remember. Think back to your wedding day. And guys, you probably see those doors in the back of the church swing open. And there she is, right? There she is in that beautiful dress, walking down. Your eyes are fixed on her. She is gorgeous. And guys, or ladies, those doors are open. You're walking down the aisle. Your eyes are fixed on him. Boy, is he handsome. Oh, he's dashing, isn't he? All up there in his suit. He looks great. And when you guys get up there, there's something about that day. Maybe it's the anticipation of that wedding day. I don't know what it is, but there's a reason why they call it the happiest day of your life. It's not just a cliche. There's so much joy in that day. There's so much joy in that moment when you get to tell that person, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. There's so much joy in that day. That whole day. There's so much joy that you can't take it all in, right? It's not just that ceremony. It carries on throughout the rest of the day. A buddy of mine told me at my wedding, he said, take some mental snapshots. Take 3 mental snapshots, he told me, of your wedding. Moments that you want to remember a little more vividly, because he said there is so much that goes on that day. You can't take it all in. There is so much happiness, there's so much joy, there's so much excitement, and it just goes by in a blur. And he was totally right. That day, gone in a blur. There's something about a wedding-type joy that just is unlike any other kind of joy. Now, if you're single, I haven't forgotten about you, okay? If you're single, when you're at a wedding, when you're at someone else's wedding, what are you thinking about? When you're single as a spectator in the pews at the ceremony, or if you're there eating dinner at the reception, what are you thinking about? My guess is that at least one moment or one thought that you have is your own wedding. You're probably thinking of your own wedding, and I say that is exactly what Jesus was thinking about. That Jesus was thinking about his own wedding at this wedding at Cana. Now maybe I'm losing you. Maybe you're thinking, okay, Pastor, you've lost me. Jesus wasn't married. I'm not sure where you're going with this. Hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought. And pay very careful attention to what's about to come next, because I think this is so important in understanding this miracle, this wedding at Cana. You've got this celebration going on. Okay? You got this celebration going on. People are having a good time. People are celebrating. And Jesus, a single man off by himself, is thinking about his own wedding. Mary comes along, notices that this wedding is about to go downhill. They're about to run out of wine. This is going to be so embarrassing for this couple. So she goes over to her son, Jesus, who just so happens to be Almighty Son of God, who just so happens to be able to do anything that he could. And she makes a pretty strong suggestion, I guess you could say, that Jesus do something about this. Now when Jesus responds, did anything ever strike you as odd about his response? Listen to his response again. This is what Jesus says. He basically says, what is it to me? My hour hasn't come yet. Okay, John uses that phrase at least 5 other times. My hour hasn't come yet. And every time he uses it in his gospel, it's talking about Jesus, talking about his coming death. He's talking about his crucifixion on the cross. So this is the dialogue you have going on. Mary comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, they're out of wine. It's not my time to die yet, Mom. Does that make sense to you? The only way for that to make sense, is that Jesus was thinking not about this wedding at Cana, but he's thinking about his wedding that will take place in the future. A wedding that John, our gospel writer John, also writes about in the very last chapter of Revelation. A wedding that will take place at the end of time. This is what John says. Revelation chapter 21. He says, I saw a holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. You know what that's talking about. And that bride there is you. It's us. It's the church, not Shepherd of Peace. It's the church of God worldwide. It's all believers in God. Jesus at this wedding, alone by himself, is thinking about his own wedding that will take place. He's a bit disturbed. You can see that by the sense that the way he talks to his mother Mary. He's a bit disturbed because he knows in order for that wedding to take place, the hour of his death has to come. In other words, in order for Jesus to bring wedding-type joy into your lives, into the life of his church, he has to take care of your sin. It means he has to die for your sin. And that's troubling to him. Because as he's thinking about that hour, the pain that it's going to bring, the scorn, the ridicule, the mockery, the beating that he's going to have, but ultimately, the wrath of God against him, the wrath of God to punish him, his Father in heaven, punishing him for our sins, so that he can be united in his church in joy forever. Isn't that why Jesus came? That's exactly why Jesus came. What better way to reveal that than at this very first miracle at a wedding? Saving a disorganized couple from social embarrassment, saving their situation by miraculously putting joy back into that wedding. And how did he do it? He changed water into wine. And think about that wine. That wine. So much wine. He gave them more wine than they would need, plenty of wine, copious amounts of wine that they would need for the rest of that celebration. But his miracle isn't just a quantity miracle. Look at the quality of that wine. The finest Cabernet, the finest Pinot Noir, aged to perfection. I don't know what it was. It was the best tasting wine, they said. This is amazing stuff. This never happens. This is completely opposite the way people do wedding celebrations. Jesus went above and beyond their needs for their wedding celebration and gave them a wedding that they would never forget. And isn't that how he deals with you and me too? He saves us more than just from some little social embarrassment. He saves us from hell by showering on us grace upon mercy, constantly, over and over again. It's overflowing. Copious amounts of grace, more amounts of grace than we deserve. And never once has Jesus ever come across a multitude of sins that he said, that's too much, I can't provide for that, I cannot forgive that. No. He showers us with more grace than any of our sins. And never once has he come across one sin that he said, that's too perverse, that's too gross, I can't forgive that. No. Even what you think would be the vilest of sins that would be impossible to forgive, Jesus says, I forgive that. And it's by his life and his work alone that you get to have joy in your life. That you get to have a wedding to look forward to. There is no joy like this. There's nothing on this world that can give us a joy like this. No amount of wealth or possessions or toys, experiences, moments, or even relationships that we have, even your relationship with that closest person to you, with your spouse or your children, pales in comparison to that joy of what Jesus has done for you, of saving you. That joy is the best thing. It's there with you every moment of every day. It's what being a Christian is all about. After all, it's what the gospel is all about. Joy. Knowing that Jesus has saved us. Knowing that we have something to look forward to besides this crummy world. Joy. And nothing on this world can take that joy away from you. Jesus is not about to give you a superficial joy that can just be ripped away by something. Not your worst day at your job, not your worst day at school, not even losing your job, going into the worst financial hardship, going into bankruptcy, nothing. Even losing your closest loved one that cannot take this joy away from you. It can't. I'm not saying it's not going to hurt. There's pain. You know that. You know there's pain. Let that joy that Jesus gives you soothe that pain. Maybe it's been a while since you've been able to really grasp that joy. Maybe it's been a while since you've been really able to grasp the heights and depths and lengths and widths of God's love for you. All these little things keep coming up, these little joy suckers that just suck the joy out of you, that just make you feel crummy, and these little bitty things that keep coming up, and you just can't get to that joy. Let me tell you something. Look again at what Jesus did. Look again at the broad scope of what Jesus did. Ultimately, he saved a disorganized couple from a social embarrassment. If he wouldn't have done this, that couple would have been married. Yeah, their wedding would have stunk. Yeah, the celebration would have been cut sooner. And life would have moved on. Nobody would have died. In the grand scheme of things, on a scale of urgency, this is pretty low. Jesus, when Mary came to him, didn't say, Mom, I've got bigger fish to fry. This isn't worth my time. This, even though it's a relatively small thing, if anything else, shows you Jesus cares. There is nothing too small, even if it's just a little joy sucker, nothing too small, nothing too simplistic to take to Jesus in prayer. He cares about everything. So why not go with everything to the one who cares about everything and live in his joy once again? Know that whoever you are, wherever you are in life, you've got a joyous occasion to look forward to. You've got a wedding to be prepared for. And ultimately, you've got a bigger picture to keep in mind. Because that's what Jesus did. He saw the bigger picture at this wedding at Cana and revealed his first miracle as a form of that bigger picture, that sign as a bigger picture. He revealed his glory in that miracle to show us what he is all about. Bringing joy back into your lives, bringing that wedding-type joy into your life. Maybe the disciples didn't get it right away. Maybe we didn't necessarily get it right away. What better way is there for Jesus to reveal his first miracle? It's all about the bigger picture. And God grant that you keep that bigger picture in mind. God grant that you keep that bigger picture in mind as the only source of your true joy in this world.